to The Catholic Perspective, a podcast brought to you by rcspirituality.org. Enjoy the episode.
Some straight talk about divorce and annulment.
Tom and Paula lived together as husband and wife on Rosecliff Avenue on the east side of Cleveland for more than 70 years. Tom worked at the post office. He retired when he turned 75. Paula worked as a bank teller. She planned on leaving her job as soon as they had their first child, but it turns out that they never had any children. It was one blessing that God didn't give them. Paula stopped working at the bank when she turned 75. They led a simple life. They were never featured in the newspaper. They never got rich. They never took fancy vacations. But everyone on their street loved them. They were the neighborhood babysitters. They were the shoulders to cry on for young spouses having marriage troubles. They were the organizers of the yearly block party. Their yard was more played in than any other yard on the street. Their home exuded happiness and joy, just like their happy, joyful faces. Tom died in his sleep a few days before his 91st birthday. He seemed to have been in perfect health, but his life had reached its conclusion. Paula seemed to be in perfect health too, and she seemed to withstand the loss fairly well, for a couple of days anyway. But after 3 days without Tom, she too passed away, unable, so it seemed, to let her husband get too far out of reach. This is a true story, but it's not a rare one. It often happens that couples who share long and loving marriages die almost simultaneously, not for medical reasons, but for spiritual ones. The phenomenon eloquently illustrates something about marriage that you rarely hear people talk about, which is too bad because that something is the most important thing about marriage. It's called the marriage bond. Understanding what it is and where it comes from is the only way to understand Catholic teaching about divorce, remarriage, and annulment. When two people go into business together, they form a partnership. They agree to work together on a project that will benefit each of them. The bond they form is entirely practical, exterior, contractual. When two people get married, they do much, much more. They pledge their whole selves to one another, unconditionally, out of love, and in so doing they become, as it were, one person. They are bonded together not by an external contract or agreement like business partners, but by the mutual commitment to be one another's spouse. Not just friends, not just companions, but spouses. As spouses, their very identity as individual persons is enriched. Tom and Paula are no longer just Tom and Paula. They are now Tom the husband and Paula the wife. Two separate individuals have come together and freely entered into a new, unified life in which the spouses live no longer for themselves, but for each other. A new physical, spiritual reality has come into existence, a marriage, a unique, exclusive, permanent bond between husband and wife. That's what marriage is. Jesus himself explained it like this, quoting Genesis. Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, so they are no longer two, but one flesh? Even though you can't physically see the marriage bond, it's as objectively real as the child that naturally springs forth from it. That child, an objective, physical, spiritual reality that didn't exist before, is a living icon, a palpable expression of what the marriage itself is by its very nature, an objective, physical, spiritual reality that didn't exist before. And that's why a marriage can no more be undone, which is what divorce and remarriage claims to do, to undo a previous marriage, than the life of that child. You can dissolve a business agreement, but you can't dissolve a child, at least not without murdering it. And you can't dissolve a marriage without the death of one of the spouses. From that point of view, it's no wonder that Paula simply couldn't continue living without Tom. After 70 years of faithful marriage, her very life, body and soul, was fused, as it were, with her husband's. Of course, that doesn't happen every time one spouse dies. Other factors are involved. Many widows and widowers survive long after their spouse's death and even marry again, even though their love was deep and their marriage true. This understanding of marriage is, admittedly, not easy for a lot of us to accept. We have all been more or less infected by our society's divorce mentality, which sees marriage as a mere social construct, like any other type of social agreement, like any business partnership, purely at the mercy of the needs and whims of the partners. We don't have to go very far to discover the flaws in that point of view. We don't even have to go to the Bible or the Catechism. All we have to do is go to human experience. Even though different societies have surrounded marriage with many different ceremonies and taboos and external traditions, they have all had the institution of marriage. In other words, as one expert puts it, marriage is rooted so deeply in human nature that it is found in every age and culture. Anthropologists studying a culture do not ask whether its members marry, but what special characteristics marriage has in that society. In doing so, they refer to something recognizable in any society by its constant characteristics, which are the more or less stable, heterosexual relationship recognized by society as the community in which it is appropriate for a man and a woman to engage regularly in sexual intercourse and to beget and raise children. Human beings create business and legal partnerships, but we don't create marriage. Rather, we enter into marriage just as we enter into friendship. The institution of marriage is natural. It's an objective reality, built into human nature by God Himself. It's what people do. It exists prior to legal and social codes and cannot be essentially altered by them any more than human nature itself. As Christ put it, what God has joined together, no human being must separate. That's what the scientists and the anthropologists can tell us about marriage. But common sense leads us to the same conclusion. When a normal couple gets married, it's because they want to spend the rest of their lives together, and they want to build a family. That's what marriage is. And if asked why they want to get married, that's what they will answer. And if that's not their answer, if their answer is something like, we're looking for financial security, or I need a spouse in order to advance in my career, or she's pregnant and she doesn't want to get an abortion, but we don't want to embarrass her. If those or other external practical goals are the only real reasons for either one of the spouses, then they may go through with some kind of a marriage ceremony. They may have a wedding, but they will not really be consenting to marriage. They will be entering into a glorified business partnership, but not into the marriage bond. Likewise, if one or both would-be spouses puts unnatural conditions on the marriage, for example, that they will purposely avoid having children so that they can be free to travel, or that if they get a divorce they will divide their property in such and such a way, or if the groom is consciously intending to continue having extramarital affairs, in cases like these, the formation of a true marriage bond is blocked. The couple may be forming a legal contractual relationship, but not the full interpersonal communion of spouses. In other cases, even when the couple enters marriage in good faith and does everything they believe is necessary for marriage, there may be an unconscious defect in their capacity to make the full consent necessary to form the marriage bond. A temporary or permanent psychological condition, for instance. In this case, too, no real marriage would be entered into. Because human nature is fallen, wounded by original sin, cases like these are not unheard of, and that's why the Church has what's called the process of marriage annulment. Unlike divorce, which claims to undo a marriage bond that really existed, an annulment states that an apparent marriage never really existed, because a flaw in the consent of one or both parties blocked the formation of the marriage bond. In that case, the parties involved are not really married, and so they are free to get married. Sometimes the cause of failed marriages can be traced back to these kinds of conscious or unconscious flaws in the original consent. Each Catholic diocese assigns the difficult and delicate task of discerning these cases to a marriage tribunal, which operates according to carefully prescribed procedures. Sometimes serious difficulties in a marriage may require, for the good of the spouses or the children, separation, or even civil divorce, for example in the case of physical abuse. And Catholics in these situations can still be in full communion with the Church. Annulments and separations are always painful, which is one of the reasons why the Church encourages her children to prepare well for marriage, not only by attending marriage preparation classes, which are important, but most importantly by living a life of virtue, prayer, and faith, and by ridding themselves of the widespread divorce mentality. There are times in every marriage when love is sorely tested, and it will emerge stronger and deeper if the test is met and overcome with fortitude, self-sacrifice, and maturity. Virtues which need to be developed before the moment of crisis in order to be activated and further developed during the crisis. The same fallen human nature, what Christ called hard-heartedness, that causes crises in individual marriages also gives rise to the various social corruptions of the institution of marriage. Polygamy, for instance, in which one man has many wives simultaneously, or legalized divorce and remarriage. Certain societies admit these and other deviations, but that doesn't alter, it can't alter, the true nature of marriage. Jesus explained it like this to the Pharisees. Because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. I say to you, whoever divorces his wife and marries another, unless the marriage is unlawful, in other words, if there was no real marriage bond in the first place, commits adultery. Jesus thinks so highly of this natural institution of marriage, in fact, that he elevated it to the level of a sacrament. For baptized Christians, therefore, the natural bond of marriage is reinforced with the strength of God's grace and transformed into a supernatural reality, a way for the spouses to love not only each other and their children, but also God and the Church. Husband and wife are no longer two, but one flesh, one person, as it were. They exist no longer for themselves, but for each other. That's how God designed it. That's why getting married is a big deal, a much bigger deal than starting a new business with a new business partner. And that's why Paula died only 3 days after Tom died, even though she was physically healthy, because her very life was so committed to his that she simply ran out of life without him. There was another married couple, Barbara and Matt, who lived on the east side of Cleveland not too far away from Tom and Paula on South Main Street. They were popular, wealthy, and well-traveled. After they'd been married for only 1 year, Matt was in a horrible car accident. When they got him to the hospital and stabilized his condition, they discovered that he was paralyzed from the neck down. When the doctors told Barbara, she was devastated. All their wonderful plans were shattered in an instant. When Matt regained consciousness and the doctors told him what had happened, he asked to see his wife. They each tried to smile through their tears. He told her that he knew she didn't marry him in order to stay home and take care of a cripple, in order to spend her life celibate and childless. He told her that he knew she would be happier if she left him and found someone else. He told her he would understand. This too is a true story. What did Barbara do? Did she end her partnership for mutual benefit and get a divorce? Or did she stay faithful to her marriage vows? Did she look for happiness in comfort, pleasure, and convenience, or in the fidelity of true love, the kind of fidelity that Christ showed for his spouse, the Church, when he suffered and died on the cross? What did Barbara do? What would you do? It's worth thinking about now, so you'll be ready to make the right choices later. And that's some straight talk about divorce and annulment.
You have been listening to The Catholic Perspective, a resource from rcspirituality.org. Please visit our website and check out more great resources to help you pray, learn, grow, and go. Please join our team of digital missionaries by subscribing at rcspirituality.org.